It's Sam Prakel, right? Is Prakel how you say your last name?
Yeah, yeah. Well
Okay,
done. That's it.
cool.
Yep.
I've heard it a few different ways. How I've always thought of it in my head is Prakel.
Mhm.
But and then also maybe we just kick off the podcast this way. Maybe we just leave the Prakel thing in there. I do. Yeah. Well, let's just kick this off. Sam, how you doing today?
Great, great. Happy to be here.
Well, I told you we'd keep it super light and conversational, so we'll kick it off somewhere where I said Prakel. The reason why I was thinking about that, and then I was like, oh, we should kick this off, is because there's a funny story. I was on YouTube. I think I was rewatching like the 5K record from Joshua Cheptegei.
Mhm.
However you say his name. Here's where you come in. I remember someone was hating on Paul Swingard's pronunciation of his name, and I saw you defend Paul in the comment section. I don't know if you remember
Wow,
commenting that, but you were like,
wow.
Paul does research. He has it right.
I do remember now. I don't know if I would have remembered if he didn't bring it up, but I'm a big Paul fan because he is an Oregon guy. He was a professor at Oregon, and he's the voice of Hayward Field, so he's always around. And I know he works super hard, like studying the pronunciations, especially of the African runners because they have hard to pronounce names, and I knew he was doing it right. So yeah, I had to defend it when most of the comments, like all the top comments, were like, "Oh, you're saying
Right.
it wrong. You're saying it wrong." And I don't comment on YouTube videos very often, so that's a rare comment from me.
I had to bring that up because we were talking about your last name, the pronunciation of it, and then it made me think. I was like, oh, I do remember seeing Sam one time comment on a pronunciation thing. I don't know if it's Cheptegei or Cheptegei, whatever Paul said as you were mentioning. I'm sure is right. I didn't know he was a professor. What's he a professor of?
I think he's in the business school. He does like sports business
Okay.
classes. So kind of yeah, a good guy with a lot of background experience in that field. Um, yeah.
Did you enjoy your classes in your time at Oregon, or was it very much the athlete student mindset of I'm just gonna do the bare minimum to get through these things and think about my track workout later?
No, I was a pretty big nerd in school. I tried a lot. I was top of my class in high school, and then went to Oregon and chose one of the harder majors. And looking back, I don't know if I was just trying to make it really hard on myself, but I studied biochemistry in college, so I didn't see Paul Swangard at all in the business school. I was more so in all the science buildings, taking a bunch of labs and OChem and physics and a lot of hard sciences, which I really enjoyed. Probably added a little too much to my plate some years, but yeah, I really was pretty into school in college and put probably just as much effort into that as my running. And I don't know, like maybe I could have focused more on running and less on school, but I think it ended up being the best for me because I think if you approach one thing with that type of mindset, then you're gonna approach like everything in your life with that mindset. So school just helped me like stay on top of running and on top of other things. So yeah, I squeezed as much out of my college experience as possible, I would say.
I know you're around the UW guys a lot, so I think you can give an opinion on this answer. Do you feel like over the years to modern day, we've seen a progression of kids in the NCAA caring less about school? Because in my conversations with people like you, when I ask about, their college years, they seem more intent about taking classes more seriously versus even freshmen at the University of Oregon. When I ask them, it's like they're embarrassed to admit how much they don't care. And like we'll say stuff where they're like, I hope my professor's not listening. Like it just seems like kids these days are like so focused on their running because that's the competition is just crazy.
Yeah, I can't speak for the guys. I know there's definitely a mix of guys on like what they're studying. I know for myself, my intensity with school declined throughout my college years. Like by my fourth and fifth years, I was probably more in that mindset of like, okay, I want to try to go pro in running. I need to be all in with this. So any type of distraction or extra like energy spent on school was sort of in my mind like a little detrimental. But no, I mean early on in my college career, I wanted to go to med school. I wanted to have a good GPA to try to get into a good program and stuff. So I was pretty into it. Yeah, I don't know if things have changed. I think maybe with just more opportunities with running, like all like there's like NIL deals and sponsorships that you can get in college and then after college. Like if you want to keep running, there's I think if you truly want to keep running, there's a way to do it. I think a lot of kids see that path where, you know, at Oregon, it was sort of like um, pro running was a reality, but maybe not a lot of other schools. But now I think a lot of kids kind of can have that dream and can make it into a reality just because of all the opportunities out there. So, um, yeah, if that's kind of the way you see yourself succeeding in running, then go for it. But I can say you that school like didn't take away from my career in college, and I mean, there's definitely a way to make it work. And if you have a coach who's like willing to work with you too, like Coach Powell was willing to work around my busy class schedule, and sometimes I had to work out alone, or sometimes I couldn't go to practice, but he understood because he wanted me to focus on school. So yeah, I can't speak for the guys, but I know everyone's different.
I'm curious to hear about your experience at Versailles as it relates to Oregon. Did a lot of kids in your class stay in state just because it's such a small school? I come from Ohio, even Toledo, which is a bigger city in Ohio. It's like all Toledo, Bowling Green, Ohio, Ohio State. Like very few kids venture out. When you told your classmates, of course, they knew you ran, but I'm sure like you were the only kid in your class to go to Oregon. Was that a bit of like a culture shock? And how many people from your class stayed in state versus explored to the West Coast, the East Coast, the South?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and I guess to answer one part of the question, it was a culture shock for me going to Oregon from small town Ohio. I can get more into that later, but I would say I think like there was about 113 kids in my class, and two of us went to school out of state.
Oh, wow.
One of my classmates went to Illinois, and I went to Oregon. I guess if you include a Ball State, which is close to Ohio, I guess
Sure.
that's out of state as well. But it's still pretty close to home. Had a lot of classmates go to Toledo. A lot of classmates go to Ohio State, UD. A lot of people stayed in state and stayed close to home, which I get. Like it's a great place to be in. And to be honest, like my first year at Oregon, I was kind of having um, a little regret, like, oh, like I'm a little homesick. Like maybe I should have stayed close to home. Like that sounds pretty nice being in Ohio right now. I loved Ohio. I loved Versailles. So was questioning my decision a little bit. Fall quarter of freshman year, but luckily I transitioned and had a really good team and a really good community around me to make my experience at Oregon great. But yeah, it was yeah, interesting going through the recruiting process because I was like visiting all these out of state schools and I couldn't really relate to or didn't have anyone kind of going through that same experience. So it was all very new. But luckily my older sister Mary went through that process and she went to school out of state and spent a lot of time away from home. So I got to talk to her and get to see how she handled that whole recruiting process. But yeah, still love Versailles and yeah, like visiting and seeing all my friends who live kind of in the West Central Ohio area. Yeah.
I remember when I was at USA's last year in July, it was the first time I had been to Oregon, and the 3 hour time difference was like very difficult. Well, USA's is so busy, but anytime I'd have free time to like call a family member or a friend or something, it was like, it's like 2 a.m. their time. It was very difficult to like find common times. Did you ever run into that issue of like, man, my mom's probably sleeping right now? I was going to call her.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, I tried to call back home pretty consistently, and you get so caught up in your day. Like we had practice in the afternoon every day, so I'd get done with practice and then have dinner and then have schoolwork, and then I'm like, oh, like I wanted to talk to my parents, and it would yeah 3 hours ahead they're already sleeping. So a couple of times I yeah either had to do some late calls or wait until the next day. But yeah, it's easy to kind of let the day get away from you. But I think I'm pretty used to it now, and um, yeah, I try to schedule most of my phone calls before I get too involved with my evening out here.
Let's talk about Ohio running and your time at Versailles. We're approaching the time of year. I think yesterday in Ohio was like a lot of Ohio people know what I'm talking about. The conference meet is split into 2 days. At least it is today. So like yesterday was the prelims, the final for the 4x8, and then Friday is normally the finals. What do you remember from these weeks of like the postseason where conference happens and then it's districts, regional, states? What are your fondest memories from Ohio track running?
I think my favorite track meet that I was ever a part of, still to this day, was the conference meet my senior year. We were hosting at home, and we hadn't won in a while, or at least like while I was on the team. We'd come close. I think maybe my sophomore year we were like half a point away from winning. We were always competing with Minster. They were winning most of the years, and I remember that whole week we were just kind of we kept scoring out the meet like we can do it, we can do it. And it came down to the 4x4, and I remember like I was on that 4x4. I was the second leg, and all we had to do was win. We just had to beat Minster on that 4x4, and the meet was pretty dramatic. There was a rain delay, so like the 4x4 happened pretty late, just under the lights, and we ended up coming away with the win. We set a meet record, and yeah, we won the conference. And there, yeah, nothing beats a conference meet. I feel like that's just like a total team effort. Everyone gets involved. You know, a lot of people play important roles, just scoring. I remember we had a lot of little things happen that just like went our way, and ended up, I think, pulling like a little upset over Minster and winning. So that to this day is still like one of my favorite track memories. Was yeah that early part of May, that the MAC conference, the Midwest Athletic Conference, was what we were in, which is yeah, it was a fun conference to be a part of, and I still yeah, it was fun to kind of close out the regular season at home, winning that as a team.
Do you ever think back to those days where, as a senior in high school, you're committed to the University of Oregon, one of, if not the best distance running program at the time? You're one of the top guys in the country. You're like that guy when it comes to running, and your fondest memory comes from a conference meet 4x4 that like the rest of the world doesn't care about. Do you ever think about that and you're like, man, this sport it's awesome. It's so wholesome.
Yeah, it is funny to think back on my career, and um, yeah, nothing beats those high school memories, just because you're improving so much as a runner. You're the social aspect of being on a team is huge, um, and it's just like I love thinking back on that because it reminds me of why I got into the sport and why I love it. I just love competing. I'm a competitive guy, and it didn't matter if it was the Olympics or the MAC conference meet. Like you can turn any, you can put meaning on any event, and that's why running is special. Is because at the end of the day, you're just trying to run faster than the person next to you, and it can be in any setting, any country, and it's a pretty special sport.
What was the competition like within the conference meet for the 16 and 32? I gotta know. Were you in trainers jogging and making a fool out of everyone else, or did you have some competition?
There is some competition. Yeah, I should probably shout out some high school rivals. We had a couple of D1 guys who were good. Just like yeah, we were running 920s in the 2 mile and 420 in the mile. So nothing crazy compared to nowadays. But back then I was pretty good for like a small Ohio conference. I know I had some good duels with Mike Cease from Coldwater. He ended up running for Wyoming, and then Francis and Dominic Slankoski from Minster, they were always there with me in the mile, and their 4x8 was always pretty good. So it's fun to think back on some of those duels, and yeah, they were the first people to kind of push me to be better. So it's good to have some competition, even though we were in a pretty small school conference.
I've loved talking about your high school years, and we'll get into that in a second, but I want to give some context to them. So let's go even further back in time. Take me through how you got your start in the sport of running, as well as what your first impressions of it were.
Yeah, I started running pretty young. I always attribute my start to kind of following in the footsteps of my oldest sister, Mary. She started running cross country in middle school, um, and I'm 4 years younger than her. So I would kind of get to see her race and practice, and would even go to practice with her sometimes, and um, just always enjoyed pushing myself. Yeah, I would run local 5Ks. I remember, I think I was winning my age group, and I think in sixth grade I was running like 18-minute 5K. So I was like, I had some
Jeez.
talent. I knew there was something there, and everyone was kind of telling me like you're good at this. Like you should keep doing it. But even through all of that, I still like did every single sport I could do. I played baseball, soccer, pee wee football. I did basketball, swim team. So I was just very active. I had a lot of energy growing up. Like my mom always called me a walking volcano because I just like had this like I just temper that would you never knew when it was going to erupt. And as soon as I started running, though, I was able to like kind of use that energy for good with something. So it was just a good like outlet for energy, and I just feel like I could think clearly when I was out running. So I just enjoyed the training and the lifestyle that went into it. And then finally, when I could like compete in junior high, seventh grade, I um, got pretty serious and had some good coaches that held me back and made sure they kept it fun. My cross country coach, Coach Plyman, um, is was a huge influence and a reason why I enjoyed the sport and like tried to not take myself too seriously. But I probably still did. But yeah, I started pretty young and had a lot of good opportunities, in Ohio and I think the community in Versailles was really supportive of athletics and we had good coaches and everything. So it was a pretty good start to the sport.
You've mentioned your sister, Mary, if I'm not mistaken, is her name, a few times in this conversation. Can you give some greater context to kind of the role model she was and the inspiration she was leading you into the sport and the different opportunities that it brought? I'm curious to hear about that because I think some people fall in that boat that you fell into, and others are the complete opposite, where they'll see an older sibling, specifically if it's an older sister, if they're a guy, and they'll be like, I'm doing the exact opposite sport.
Yeah. Um, I think I'm just such a competitive guy. Like when I like one of my earlier memories of watching her, she won state in the 3200 her junior year. And I was like, I want to do that. Like I want to win state. So like that was kind of when it all started, is like my only goal in life is to win state. Like I don't care if it's cross country or in the 1600 or the 3200, like I just want to win state. Um, so that was, I think, a big moment, like watching her do that and seeing how awesome it was, like seeing her stand on top of the podium and how the whole town got behind it. And so I think the idea of just being state champion at the time for me was enough motivation to want to pursue it. Um, and and then she got like her photo put up in the wall at the school. So like on this wall at our old school next to the gym, there was a section of like photos of all the state champions from Versailles, and she was the most recent one on there. But there was also this miler named Tyler Bargy who won state for Versailles, I think in 2004 in the 1600, and he had the school record at 4:15. And I would see that every day, like walking into class, and I'm like, I wanna be that. So just kind of like that tradition and wanting to follow in her footsteps was a big reason why I got into it.
How did your family handle the success coming from a small town? Like, what was the conversation like with your parents at the dinner table? Was it running focused? Was it, we're not going to talk about running? Like, I assume you guys are the only or one of very few people from your town to have two state champions in the same family.
I mean, I'm trying to remember. I don't know if we talked a ton about running. I know my dad and we love to talk about running. So it was more so I was talking about track, and then my mom like trying to change up the subject because that's all we talked about. But no, I would say in high school I was a pretty well balanced student. And I was in the band. I did all these other activities. I was in scouts. I did swim team in the winter, involved in other groups and stuff. So I think there was plenty to talk about besides running, and I'm glad I stayed pretty balanced because as my career has gotten longer and longer, I've gotten more and more focused on running. So I think it would have been a long time to kind of sustain that focus if I was all in from my like junior high and high school days. So I was just trying to have fun with it. All my friends were doing it, but at the same time, I knew there was something there, and I wanted to get better and continue to improve.
Sam, you mentioned to me that sixth grade, like 18-minute 5K. And I know you ran some crazy times in seventh and eighth grade because I remember when I was in middle school, like looking up like state record. You might still have a state record, to be honest. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. And just being like, I have no clue how Sam did that. I am curious, looking back, as you look back on those like middle school years, particularly, is there a time that stands out to you that you think to yourself, oh my gosh, how did I run that at that age?
um, Yeah, it's funny because I don't know. Like, there's so many young kids that are fast these days. I don't know if it sounds that impressive, but I remember back before it was like an official event, they had like the middle school state meet for track and cross country. And track, I ran 4:35 for the 1600 in eighth grade,
It's crazy.
which I think at the time was maybe the meet record. I'm sure it's not anymore.
I think it
I
was when
think
I was in middle school because I think I was looking at the records and that's what I came across.
mhm. Yeah, so that one was up there, and then running. I think I was 10:04 for the 2 mile in cross country was for a while the record for the middle school state meet, but I don't think it is anymore. But yeah, yeah, I think definitely felt that um, I had some talent early on, but was a challenge in itself, trying to, like, maintain, like, kind of manage that pressure from like the early success. And I remember my dad always talking to me like, you you have the talent, but I think the difference is going to be like how, like, hard you can work and utilize that talent. So I always think of that even to this day, and how I train and how I yeah, stay on top of things.
Speaking of that eighth grade mile or 1600 you spoke of, the 4:35, I was looking on Brooks PR's website because I'm doing a series with Brooks this year leading into the Brooks PR meet. And I was looking at the junior boys mile, and some of the times these kids are running are just like disgusting. And I saw the top time and I looked up the kid, and he's from Ohio. It's got to be the record. I think he ran 4:24 indoors in eighth grade.
No
Um,
way.
which is just like jaw dropping, like just crazy. So kids are just like, to your point, kids these days are so fast. And I think, you're significantly older than me, but even when I was in eighth grade, like 5 years ago, I was like, man, 4:35, like if a kid ran 4:35 in eighth grade, it is crazy. So crazy. Sam, I want to talk about the bridge between high school and your time at Oregon. Can you take me through your first interaction with Coach Powell and ultimately what made you decide to join the Ducks?
Yeah, I remember my first phone call with him pretty clearly. I mean, like a lot of these recruiting calls that go, he did most of the talking. But I could tell he was different from a lot of the other college coaches. He just um, was super genuine, and like truly showed this belief in me. I think I caught his eye because I sent him a couple of my race videos from my junior year, and um, my times weren't that impressive compared to the top guys in my class. But I think I ran 4:10 at the state meet my junior year, but it was a huge negative split. Like, my last lap was really fast, and I think that kind of, I'm sure he gets a lot of emails from high school kids, and I think he kind of saw that video and saw the way I ran, and saw a lot of potential in me. So he I think he called me right away and invited me out on a visit, or we tried to decide on when I could visit Oregon, which was, yeah, really was huge for me, because I don't know, I was getting like some interest from schools, but not, I wasn't like one of the top guys. So to hear like the coach at Oregon say these things was just unbelievable for me, and it was kind of a dream. So I had to um, continue to connect with him and figure out a way to make it work, because I don't know. At the time, I didn't think I was fast enough for Oregon, but he kind of like put some belief into me, and yeah, it was a special phone call, and yeah, he thought I was going to go to Stanford all along, and then when I called him to commit to Oregon, he was shocked. He said, just because of like the student I was, and he thought, oh, you'll probably go to Stanford, but I just connected so well with Coach Powell, and believed in his system, and I'm really glad I made that decision.
So from the sounds of it, you reached out to him first, right?
Yeah. So I sent him an email just out of nowhere, just
Okay.
because like that summer I had gone to the trials and I saw Eugene. I was like, oh, like this would be a cool place to go to school. Like, I don't think I'm good enough to run here, but we'll give it a shot. So I reached out to him first, and I think yeah, somehow he saw the email and was able to find time to call me.
I know that recruiting has changed a little bit since you've been in it, but I think it's similar enough. I want to hear, the reason I asked is because I want you to speak. We have a lot of high school listeners. Can you speak to the importance of taking action and taking initiative? That was something my parents always told me, is like, take initiative, like always be the one to send the note. I wasn't being recruited, but just in life in general, because I think so many kids expect coaches, even if they're really, really fast, like a coach like Coach Powell, to reach out to him. And it's like, you're one of 200 kids on his radar. Like sometimes you have to make the opportunities happen.
Yeah, for sure. You can't expect like anything to be done for you. You have to kind of, yeah, like you said, take initiative. I filled out, every single questionnaire I could find, emailed every coach that I could find an email for, um, and yeah, even like you said, even if you are one of the faster kids, like sometimes these coaches appreciate you reaching out because they're like, oh, like I didn't know that you even exist. Like it's hard. Like it's and now that I'm on the other side, like there are so many high school runners that are all very good, and you have to find a way to make yourself stick out a little bit. You can't just send like a simple email. I don't know. Coaches love to, yeah, see potential and see, yeah, like you kind of taking control of things, and if there's something unique about the way you train or the way you race, or maybe you're a good student or you're involved in all these other things, I think finding a way to make yourself stick out is huge. So in my email, I think I just, yeah, kind of described my training briefly and said, um, like gave my PRs, and then the videos I think were what made the difference. Just because he could actually watch me run, and that's a little different than just seeing like a number on email or your PR. But yeah, I think you can't. It doesn't hurt to send an email, and you can't expect coaches to just know you're out there without trying to reach out.
For those that don't know, you're still coached under Coach Andy Powell to this day as we're talking, which is super, super cool. Was there something in the recruiting process or in that first year at the University of Oregon that you felt with your relationship with him where you thought, hey, maybe one day if I do become a pro runner, like this is the guy I'm going to stick with?
Yeah, I don't know. It really um he didn't really coach many pros when I was at Oregon. It was kind of like, you went through Oregon, and if you did go pro, you joined a Nike group, or you joined another group. So I don't know. I didn't really consider him to be an option as a pro coach until really like the last minute, where I signed with Adidas, and Adidas was okay with him coaching me. But I've always had 100% faith in like Coach Powell's like training philosophy and his coaching style. I think that's the biggest piece with a coach, is believing in the system, because that's what's going to get you to the starting line with the confidence you need to win races. I think as someone who's like struggled with, a little bit of anxiety and a little bit of like lack of confidence in the past, I think Coach Powell's done a really good job of like instilling that in me. And he made me into an athlete that could go out there and win a race. Where maybe if I started college, I was, yeah, lacking a lot of confidence and a little bit of imposter syndrome because it was Oregon and I was just from small town Ohio. But Coach Powell just, yeah, did a good job of transitioning me into the program, and still to this day, like, yeah, just the way he dials in the training for these big races is, I can't really compare it to anything else because he's the only coach I've had at this level. But I don't think it matters, because as long as I believe in what we're doing, I think that's the biggest piece. So yeah, as long as, yeah, like later in my college career, I think deep down, I wanted him to continue coaching me because I had improved each year. Like if you look back, the last 10 years, I've gotten faster in the 1500 every single year. So I just wanted to continue that progression, and I knew he was the right guy for me. So it's been a fun journey.
In my memory, your time at the University of Oregon, every year you were so, so consistent. Where do you think that consistency came from and comes from? As you mentioned, present day, you PR every single year. Where do you think this consistency aspect comes from?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, um, yeah, it's really nice being consistent. I think a lot of it just comes from like knowing my body really well, and knowing how to get the most out of myself, like each race. Like as far as like staying healthy, like that's the biggest piece of this sport, especially as a pro, is like if you can stay healthy and you can fit the training in, like you'll be ready to go. And I think I had some experiences like early on in my career, like in junior high and high school, where I just had like some injuries, and I just kind of like made this vow to myself, like you are gonna like stay healthy, like no matter what. So I do a lot of work behind the scenes, in the gym, at home. And at this point, like I know my body really well, where like if something pops up where I need a day off or a couple of days off, I kind of know like when to um, do that. But yeah, I think staying healthy is the first piece, and then once you get to the race, like I think I just have a lot of experience. I've raced, so like hundreds and hundreds of like miles and 1500 races that I just kind of know, um, how I'm supposed to feel throughout the race and know how to get the most out of myself when it comes down to it. And yeah, I think that's like big philosophy is just consistency for me. And it's, yeah, if I just keep getting better each year, I'll end up, reaching some of my goals. So that's the plan.
In your time at the University of Oregon, you were teammates with so many legends, but particularly Edward Ches, King Ches, as they call him. I was going to say Edward Ches, and I was like, well, I'll say his full name and then King Ches. I think he was a 16-time All-American, multi-time NCAA champion. What was that like? What was it like showing up to a track workout with Ches, and what was it like to just see one of, if not the greatest NCAA runner, at practice every day? I doubt you
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
of it that way at the time, but in reflection, what was it like as like a fanboy of the guy?
Yeah, it's funny because like at the time he was just Ed to us, and now every time I talk about him, like people say King Ches or Ches, and like I get it. Like on the outside, that's kind of how people like were talking about him, but to us on the inside, he was just Ed. He was like this goofy, like funny, talkative kid who was a great teammate. Like he would hold back and like every day you show up to a workout and you're like, oh man, am I going to be able to hang on to Ed today? Like I don't want to get dropped again. um, but he would hold back and help you along. Like I think he made the team better, which is um, just a unique thing, just because he was so good himself and he was able. But I think it did help him just stay fresh for his races, and he was able to perform at the championship races just because he wasn't overdoing it in practice and helping us out. And um, yeah, he was just a unique talent and had a yeah, both amazing strength and foot speed. He was just kind of a, I mean, I rarely could finish a workout with him, but just watching him from the sidelines was really really cool. And I think Coach Powell did a good job of managing him and keeping him ready to go for those big races. And um, yeah, Ed, he was a great guy to be a teammate with, and did a lot for the Oregon program too. So yeah, definitely cherish those years.
Was there a specific workout you witnessed him do that like made your jaw drop, and you look back on and you're like, I have no clue how a college guy did that?
I mean, there's definitely a couple. I think the one that I'm thinking of now is just because, like, I mean, we've been starting to do these double workouts, and Ed was kind of we didn't do them all the time when I was in college, but I remember one he did. It was maybe the 2 weeks before he set the collegiate record in the indoor mile. He did a double workout in the morning. I remember I started the tempo run with him. It was just like a 5 mile tempo, and I was supposed to maybe run 5 minute pace, and Ed like got away from me right away and finished out the tempo. I was like, oh man, like what'd you average? And he was like, oh, like 4:48. And at the time, like I was like, I don't know, we didn't have super shoes. He was just running in trainers on Priest Trail, and that was pretty good tempo for Priest Trail. Like nothing like jaw dropping. Like that part came in the afternoon when he did, I think 6 by 400, and he was just like cranking out 52s, and I'm like the first one was 52, and I'm like, what? Like, is he gonna be able to keep this going? And he did. Um, and I'm like, he's gonna run something crazy. And I mean, he 2 weeks later ran the collegiate record 3:52 in the mile, which was at the time like a very incredible performance. But I think that's the one workout that made my jaw drop, especially the afternoon. Just
So nuts.
that's some quick running.
Yeah, for sure. The first year that I was like really getting into the sport of running as a fan was the indoor mile when he raced Josh. I actually, it was one of the first, if not the first NCAA meet that I watched live. As someone who was coming into the sport, became a big fan of Ches, saw him lose to some freshman. I was devastated. I was like, what's going on? Who is this guy from New Mexico? Like, what in the world just happened? Looking back in 2024, it's hilarious looking back on like young Dominic, because I'm like, if only he knew what Josh would go on to accomplish. What was your perspective at the time of Ches getting beat by some random freshman from New Mexico at the time?
Yeah, I think I was surprised like everyone else. But I mean, Josh ran that race like so smart. Like Ed was doing maybe a little too much movement, and people were trying to focus on him, and he was having to elbow a bunch of people and run in lane 3, and Josh just when he went, and it was impressive to watch. maybe I didn't expect him to go on to become world champion, but I knew he would be a threat at the NCAA level. And I mean, I got to experience kind of that kick the next year when he did the same thing to the field when I was in the mile. And yeah, it was just kind of some impressive power. Some that he had, that closing power he showed off was something else. But yeah, I mean, at the time, yeah, again, I was team ed and was pretty surprised that someone could take him down. But I think it's evident that Josh was probably the guy to do it.
If I'm not mistaken, in your time at Oregon, you never won an NCAA title, but from recollection, I feel like you were in every final. You were always the guy leading going into the final lap. Like you were always in good position. How much did that sting leaving college? Like being so close so many times and having so many consistent, amazing performances, but never having that day where all the stars align.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I put a lot of pressure on myself my 5th year because it was the last meet at the old Hayward Field outdoor NCAAs, and I was a senior and running at home, and I really wanted to win. I was like, I want to go out winning an NCAA title at home at the old Hayward Field in the 1500. And yeah, I had a good season so far. I'd won Pac-12s. I'd won both my races at regionals. I won my prelim, and I got to the final, and yeah, just made some tactical mistakes and maybe got beat by some better runners on the day. I think that was the year that Ollie won. And yeah, it stung. It stung. But looking back on that race, it was so stacked. Like I think it would have been the race of my life to win that. And yeah, maybe if I could do it again, I would do some things differently in the race. But at the end of the day, like I got beat and had to move on. But yeah, at the time, I think it stung. I think yeah, that was my last shot at getting an individual national title, and yeah, I was pretty upset, but I think it doesn't take away from all the other cool experiences and other wins I had as a Duck, and yeah, I was fortunate to continue having these opportunities as a pro.
Shortly thereafter, you signed with Adidas and you moved to UW with Coach Powell, who ultimately went from Oregon to the University of Washington. What was that transition like from college to full time professional? And I also have to ask you how weird and maybe even difficult, like, a part of you has to be a Washington fan at this point, I would think, but also you're such a Duck. You graduated from there. You never went to Washington. What's that balance like?
Yeah, it's been super weird. Yeah, I mean, once a Duck, always a Duck, and even like my first couple years up here, I was like wearing like some Oregon stuff around and was a proud Duck, and I knew that wasn't sustainable just from like being so involved with the team. And I train with the UW team, so I root for them pretty hard. Like when they're racing, because those are my training partners. I see them every single day. I see the work they put in. So it's hard for me not to root for UW track right now. I would say when it comes to other sports, I think I lean more Oregon still, just because I had so many good memories. Going to basketball games and football games in Eugene. So I think I'm definitely a UW track fan and maybe an Oregon fan with everything else. But I would say the transition was pretty good. Like training wise and staying with Coach Powell, everything was smooth. It was a bit of a change going from Eugene to Seattle. I mean, Seattle is a much bigger city. The running was different. The routine was a little different. In Eugene, everything was super close. I live next to Hayward. I could bike everywhere. I didn't own a car. I could just run from my house every day on Priest Trail, and everything was pretty simple. But Seattle, I mean, I'm not a city boy. I grew up in small town Ohio, so it was a big change for me, like living in a city and but I got adjusted pretty quick, and I remember moving to Seattle and buying a car and exploring was, yeah, my first year here in Seattle was probably the most memorable. Just being in a new city, getting to explore everything was super fun. But yeah, I mean, I was fortunate to stay with the same coach and the same pretty much the same training philosophy. So I was able to have a pretty successful first year as a pro, and it was just fun, kind of, yeah, meeting all the runners on the UW team and learning kind of the program here. And how everything worked here, and obviously having the facilities and the Dempsey to train in during the winter was huge, and the yeah, all the coaches here were really supportive of having a couple of pro athletes around. So it was a pretty good transition after college.
You mentioned to me that, you train with the UW guys, every single day. I've had Joe Oscom on the podcast as well as Nathan Green. Super amazing guys. I met them in actually at Brooks PR last year, which was so fun. It's always awesome. And I can tell you're this type of guy where you see people run fast on TV and then you meet them and they're so down to earth. And that's certainly those two guys, which was super cool to experience. I'm curious, like you had this in your time at Oregon, you had this in your time before Oregon. Coach Powell is I don't think it's controversial at this point to say he is the greatest NCAA mile coach of all time. Why do you think this is? Like, why do you think he is so good at coaching the mile specifically? You get Nate Green, Joe Oscom, Luke, this era. You had your era before that. Then you had like Andy Weeding's era. I mean, if you put like a top seven, you'd be leaving out like guys who are all Americans, potentially NCAA champions. It's crazy at this point.
Yeah, no, he's had a pretty good run in that event, and his resume in that event is I think unmatched, like you said. I don't know, like nowadays our guys on UW team, like they can time trial pretty well, but like when I was in college, like we weren't necessarily the best at time trialing, but we were good at championship races. And I think that's a little bit of, it's a couple things. Like our training I think is really geared towards the championship type racing where you're having to make gear changes and you're having to close really fast. And then also, yeah, just like Coach Powell, and he's just really good at giving race plans that work. He knows the event super well, and he knows the competition really well, and he's gonna and he knows you really well, and everyone doesn't like run the same way. Like someone like Nathan can maybe like close really fast the last 400, but other guys like Luke, like you saw indoors, he has to take the lead at 600, and Andy just yeah watches you train, and he knows what type of race plan to give you that's gonna set you up for success. So yeah, he's just really good at building that confidence and building that fitness that is crucial for those NCAA championship type races. And it's translated to the pro level too. I mean, he's had success coaching myself, and then like we had Joe make the team last year. So I think like his style of coaching works for both college and pro athletes, and it's been fun to be a part of the system.
As you mentioned a minute ago, you've PR'd in the 15 so many years in a row. You've made so many US finals. This year is the Olympic year, 2024. How do you approach this year? What do you think is different about this year, and what's kind of the energy at practice with you, with the guys, but specifically you when you think about your goals and think about Eugene next month?
Yeah, I think with myself, I can't get too caught up in the outcome. I mean, you probably hear that from a lot of people when it comes to setting goals. Historically, I've kind of struggled with, I've been like sort of perfectionist my whole life, trying to, get everything exactly right. But I think I just need to, yeah, I mean, this year I've kind of changed my mindset into like letting the idea of like, if I need to make the Olympics to like make this year a success. Like I think that's like kind of a hard thing to put on yourself. I mean, obviously the goal is to get top three, and that's kind of like the way my career has been trending. Making finals and finishing really close to getting top three. But I think I've kind of like let that outcome go away, and I just like, it's cliche, but if I put in my best effort, and whatever the place is, whether it's third, fourth, fifth, or sixth at the trials, or anywhere above or below that, like I think I'll be happy with it. I just think I'm approaching it just focusing on myself and trying to just enjoy the process. So all those good things that you hear coaches say all the time, but it is there is substance to that, and I think it's the right way to approach like such a a stacked event like the 1500 where it could be anyone. So it'll be fun. I'm excited. I think things are going well in training, so I just gotta keep being me.
You mentioned kind of the process over the outcomes mentality. What are some of the other biggest lesson you've learned over the years as a professional runner?
Yeah, so lot of lessons. Like I think, I've improved, physically each year, like my PR has gotten faster pretty much every year. But I think mentally, I've made even bigger jumps and improvements. Everything from like how to handle nerves and how to handle negative thoughts when you're like going into a race. I think that's a big one. Any type of like anxiety or self doubt going into a race. I think I've done a good job of practicing good mindfulness and just going in and getting the most out of myself. No matter what your thoughts are telling you. I think another one that I think I've touched on before is you don't need to be perfect. You just need to like give it your all. And it's a cliche, but I talk to my wife Katie a lot about every like she hears it all, like whether I'm struggling with like a tight calf or a bad workout. So she always has good advice, and she always tells me that there's a lot of good like in between. Like even if you don't win a race or set a PR, it's not a failure. There's always like something good to take away from everything. So I think I try to approach each workout and race with that, and just keep building each week and taking away the good from everything. So I think that's a good positive way to approach things.
Sam, one final serious question for you to wrap up our conversation today. What would be the final takeaway message you want to leave with our audience today? People who have heard you, heard your story, heard where you're at going into this year, all the wisdom. What would be the final takeaway message you want the audience to walk away with?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think I've acquired a lot of knowledge and wisdom in the sport. I'm not the most, but like I've been running for a while, so I like to think back on like what's helped me the most at like each stage in my career. And I think it's easy to get distracted by what other people are doing. Social media. You go on any type of social media, see how people are racing, how they're working out. But I think if you can just like focus on yourself and do what's best for you, like you're an individual, like what works for someone else isn't always going to work for you, and vice versa. So I think if you can just focus on yourself and like just enjoy like being in the moment and doing what you like to do and going through like your own journey, whether that's trying to make the varsity team or trying to win state or trying to um, go D1 and running or trying to go pro. Like everyone has their own goals and their own journey. So if you just like focus on yourself and not get caught up in what everyone else is doing, like you're gonna get the most out of the sport. So I would kind of leave it with that and just enjoy and focus on yourself.
I love it. Okay, Sam, one final question for you. The question I ask every single guest on every single episode. If you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you personally choose to make for him?
Ooh, I would probably have to make them my risotto. I've been kind of especially like in Seattle it gets all rainy and cold in the winter. I just like a nice batch of risotto is what kind of warms the soul. So I have more experience with that dish probably than with any other dish. So I would cook them with risotto with maybe a little prosciutto and asparagus on top. So that
Fancy.
he would probably still hate it, but I would try.
It sounds fancy to me, man. Sam, really appreciate the conversation. Thank you for sharing your journey in full and so many nuggets of wisdom along the way. Cheering for you next month in Eugene. And best of luck with everything that is to come.
Thanks. Appreciate it.